Allison, you're first.
Hi.
I'm just gonna hang out. I'm like loading up dance videos in the other screen here.
Okay.
Show sound good?
Okay, sounds good.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Okay. What else did I want? Oh. Hello, Amaya. Like, oh, it's less messy over here. So I'm just waiting for more folks to drop in and pulling up some of our videos for this week. Hello, Hannah. Welcome. Hello, Crystal. Hello, Vicenna. Oh, hey, I have a request. Can you guys, where's the chat button? It's probably over here for you. Can you type in with your name as it appears in Canvas into the chat box? Sweet. Most of you have the same name in both places, but every once in a while I end up with someone who's got a nickname on Zoom, and then I'm like, who was that? So I'm just gonna wait a couple more minutes and then start rolling through, but in the meanwhile, let's just say hello. Hi. I assume you guys have all met me through the orientation video already, but I'm Amber Steele, and I teach dance classes at Skyline College and run the dance program, which, you know, we all miss being on campus and actually dancing, but I'm grateful that we get to talk about dance, at least in the meanwhiles. If you are looking for any fitness classes, I'm teaching yoga, core fitness, and cardio dance this semester, if that is of interest to you. I just realized my headset's not running. Let's put that up.
So today my plan is mostly to let you guys talk, but as a way of getting you guys excited about talking, I'm going to sort of run down what we covered in the readings this week. And just to sort of set the scene for our discussion and talk a little bit about what those different pieces mean together and what I'm hoping we're going to get out of this. And it's driving me bonkers that I'm looking at this baby outfit in the screen. That does not pertain to our lecture. There we go. Okay, so can I just call you out and you can respond either in chat or with video or just audio, whatever works best for you. But I'd love to hear just a little introduction and what your experience, if any, is with dancing. So I'll start as an example. I am mostly a modern and jazz dancer. So I studied Martha Graham technique at UC Berkeley, which is modern as in like modern dance, like modern art, which is I love mostly because it's really buff dance moves and has lots of floor work, which is exciting. And then I also have done lots of jazz. I used to have a crazy hot zombie dance troupe that traveled the nation. And then more recently, I did historically semi-accurate can-can. And now most recently, I've been doing country dancing and community dancing from England and the British Isles with the Great Dickens Fair, Christmas Fair. So I kind of do a bunch of everything. I am trying to learn tap, which is really fun. And of course, I've done some hip hop and some ballet because as a community college dancer and teacher, we kind of try and do everything. So that's what my dance history is. And I'm going to ask each of you guys throughout the conversation today if your family does any dancing. And that could be like extended family or close-up family. And I would say that my family, which is my mom's side of the family, is mostly from the United Kingdom via Canada and West Coast. And no, nobody dances in my family. Although I would say if there had been dance that was passed along through my family, it probably then would have been Irish step dancing or community Morris dancing or like ballroom stuff based on our race and ethnicity. But nobody does it. Everybody is very like woodsman-y and yeah, no fun dancing. So I'm sort of new in my background to field of dance. Allison, would you be willing to share a little bit about your background? We could be a whole room of non-dancers. This would be fine. So there's no wrong answers here. This should be a fun discussion, not like a test of your knowledge in any way.
Yeah, so my name's Allison Estrada, and I took my first class I ever took was hip hop at San Francisco.
Yay!
Yeah, that was my first hip hop class I ever took, and it was a good experience. I really enjoyed it, and I really liked it, so I decided to take more hip hop classes at college.
Cool.
Yeah, and I took hip hop class at Kenyatta College, and I took modern dance at College San Mateo, and I performed at College San Mateo too. With yeah, so that was really a good experience, and it was an amazing time with like Danae Daly. She was a really good dance teacher. She's a really good dance teacher, and yeah, that's yeah.
Yay! Awesome. Fun fact: Danae was briefly in my dance company while it was still around.
Oh yeah,
you can ask her about it next time. Yeah, she's fabulous. We went. Oh, sorry, I just dropped my napkin. We went to college, to grad school together.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and did yoga teacher training stuff together. So I
I
love her.
I took a yoga class from her too.
Fun. Allison, how about your family? Does your family dance at all?
Oh yeah. So my family is from Guatemala, and we dance. You know, special events, family parties, like cumbia, merengue, bachata, those type of dances. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I had a best friend in middle school whose father was from Colombia, and he taught me and her how to do like, well, I'm sure she got a lot more teaching than I did in that couple of years, but every time I spent the night, he was like insistent that we were practicing salsa. And I just remember there was like a rule in the household that when you walked from the kitchen to the living room, you were supposed to do your salsa hips without your glass of Dr. Pepper. We drink a lot of Dr. Pepper, like without the liquid moving at all. That was like the game of the house. He was like, you can help yourself to anything in the kitchen, but when you walk it back to the living room, you must practice those hips. I was like, okay.
Yeah,
Cool
I have not, I don't really know how to dance salsa, but I know like bachata, merengue, and cumbia. Those are the top three.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Allison.
Yeah, of course.
Hannah, do you want to go next? You're the next on my line of people. I see a message. Meep, meep. Hannah says, I personally don't have any real background in dance other than just fun dances. My family doesn't have any background either, sadly. Hannah, do you know what kind of background, if you were to make a totally racist assumption about your family, what kind of dance might people assume? Because we're about to talk about assumptions about race, so that's how I'm leading in here. Thinking. Vincena, you are next. Yes. Hannah says she's Chinese and we have something called the lion dance. That's absolutely true. The lion dance, which is the parade-like dance that you do with the giant multi-person lion and dragon. No, the lion dance is separate, right? Yes, it is. Okay, good. Thanks. Help me out here, guys, because Lord knows I don't know everything. That's true. That's a great example, actually. There's also fan dances throughout China and Asia. And there's, of course, Shenwen. Have we seen, do you guys know what Shenwen is? Yes. Yes. So those are actually really great examples because there's an interesting mix in those shows between traditional Chinese dancing and also there's like ballet point shoes and some of those things as well. So that's sort of an overlap of Russian ballet and Chinese cultures in dance, which is going to pertain to lots of things we talk about later on. Yes, there's sort of a joke on the internet about how much they advertise. Vincena, are you here? Am I saying your name correctly? I hope. Please, nobody feel shy about correcting me because I'm not shy about messing up. Ooh, tap and ballet and hip hop. That's great. Same questions. Does your family dance, or if they did dance, what do you think would be the stereotype of your family's dancing? You can eschew that final question too. If you're just like, that just makes me uncomfortable, you can tell me that you do unicorn pony dances. It's totally okay. Do you, Allison, you and Vincenna, you both took hip hop. Do you guys happen to know what style of hip hop you took? Or what style you did in that particular semester? Oh, a mommy. Ballet and tap. Excellent. And Crystal, how about you? You want to throw in your experience?
I took hip hop 3 at Kenyatta College. Yeah.
Do you know what styles of hip hop you were doing that semester?
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Like for example, some styles of hip hop, and we'll talk a lot about this as we go on, are so if you remember the dance family tree, and I'll bring up that visual in just a hot second, there's like lyrical hip hop, which is hip hop fused with contemporary, and there's crumping, and there's whacking, and there's breakdancing, I would say, is a form of hip hop. So that's sort of my question is, do you know?
Oh, it was more like a break dancing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Crystal, we got you, Crystal. Did we get everybody?
Hello. Oh.
Or is it, so you guys, Zoom flips your names around in the participants in the boxes. So if I miss somebody, it's not on purpose. It's just because I'm reading down and it got confused.
Hello, my name is Crystal. I do not have any dancing background because neither do me or my family dance because we have such a bad body coordinations. But I believe I shared this on Canvas, but I used to watch K-pop a lot when I was in high school. And I think K-pop is kind of, according to the family tree on Canvas, I think it's kind of like a jazz dance and like a mix of hip hop. Yeah. But yeah, I don't have much dancing background. Oh, also I took music 115 at Skyline before that. And I was introduced with some jazz music and like other dancing music, and that's the only experience that I have with music. I mean, dancing.
That's
So,
great. Yay. Yes, you're totally right. Thank you for bringing up K-pop. K-pop is definitely a mix between jazz and hip hop. And I am going to, hold on just a second. I'm going to screen share that page for y'all. And then let's take a little walk through our readings for this week. Shall we? Dance history family tree. Do 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 do. Okay, thank you guys for.
It was more like, it wasn't more as like breakdance. It was more, now that I'm thinking about it, it was more like a lyrical dance hip hop class that I took.
Oh.
Yeah, it was lyrical. Mm-hmm. It was more of a lyrical class. Yeah. Just wanted to put that out there.
Right. So I'm going to screen share for a little while and take you for a walk. Here we go. Okay. So here's our dance history family tree. Does it zoom in? I guess it doesn't. I'll just do it like this. There we go. Okay. So generally speaking, we're going to start back here. Yes. So this has down here new style hip hop, breakdance, and African dance, ballet, contemporary, and modern jazz as where they ended up as the what we have now. And by the way, I just spotlighted my video. I was reviewing some of my old lectures from this summer and to jog my memory about what we're talking about this week. And I noticed that I use air quotes a lot when I'm talking. And I hope that there aren't people who are reading just the captions who are missing my air quotes, because I think, especially since this class, we're about to talk a lot about appropriation and authenticity, because so much of the influence of Black dance in America has been erased or whitewashed, and that's what we're trying to, I don't know if fix is the right word, but we're trying to make up for that in this class. That's sort of my goal, is to really honor the Black dance influence on our culture today. And while we're doing that, a lot of the time I talk about air quotes when I'm suggesting that something is maybe inauthentic or copied or false or not accurate, and the closed captions never catch them. So I just noticed that about my teaching style. I'm going to try and say air quotes when I use them. So in this family tree, which I found a number of years ago, we have all of these separate groups down here. And I really think of hip hop as being more, you see how up here it's like the head of an umbrella of a series of different dances, and that's where I'm coming from as we approach this class. So yes, there's hip hop and all that it contains down here, but if we think of hip hop in general, it's got major influences of krump, breakdancing. It melds with the jazz together to make street jazz and pop and commercial jazz. And we have lady style here. You can tell this family tree is getting a little old because there's no K-pop in it. Dun, dun, dun. I think it's time for me to rebuild it. So K-pop would go somewhere here in pop and commercial jazz. It would go right down here. There's definitely also some K-pop that has contemporary modern in it, especially like the BTS solo stuff that you've seen where the guys are like doing really lyrical dance. That would be lyrical modern jazz that they do. Lady style, it's interesting that someone put lady style here because I don't even think we use that term so much anymore. But it would be, now people call it femme style, which is like, if you think about, for example, older Beyonce hip hop dances, for example, like Single Ladies would be a femme style hip hop. So what we're trying to do in this class is to get a general gist of referencing how these different dances connect to each other and intertangling that with a bit of history, especially American history. So I'm gonna go out to modules and just walk over what we did this week. So I assume we're all good on orientation. We had our orientation Zoom, but if you have any orientation questions, you're welcome to ask me at the end. And then this was also our first week. So we basically read the hybrid tradition and looked at that dance family tree that we just saw. And we have this dance style category, and this I made. So if I were going to make an assumption about what kind of a dance would go into what umbrella category, there I am using my my air quotes. Umbrella category is a term that I'm mostly using, but other people should know what it is what you mean if you say like an umbrella category of dance. So for example, this over here, world dance section, it even has its own air quotes because world dance has an implication in its very name. And this is going to be one of the things, this is the main subject that we're going to discuss today, is like, how do we value dance and how do the ways that we talk about dance imply the value of dance in our culture? So for example, when I say ballet, most of us are going to imagine, if we're imagining something current, it could be Misty Copeland, who is the most amazing African-American ballet dancer. And she's pretty much the first Black prima ballerina who is an international star, barring those African-American dance companies that do ballet. But when we say ballet, we're almost always thinking about set choreography on a giant stage in front of an audience that's all seated in chairs with fancy costumes, right? The same is kind of true about modern dance. Modern dance includes contemporary. So modern dance started in the early 1900s and then became contemporary now that it started to fuse with other styles. But it's also something that you see on a stage. And jazz dance, as we're going to learn, is a bit of both. So I think jazz dance is really interesting because it developed from the intermingling of social dances and ballet and branched out to become jazz dance and hip hop. So I think that jazz dance is the umbrella under which hip hop has all of its separate branches as well. Which is why I named this class Jazz Dance. Although I'm currently thinking, and maybe I'm going to ask you guys this at the end of the semester, but I'm thinking about changing the title to be a little more what's the right adjective? This course could also be called Black Dance in America. But as a white woman, I was like, should I call it that? Because then it's a really controversial name, as opposed to jazz dance is what all of the dances that we're going to cover in this semester are related to jazz dance. So I'd love to hear your opinions as students about naming it something more controversial or not. Okay, so getting back to the word world dance. World dance, inherent in the term world dance is this idea that there are dances that aren't white, Eurocentric, Western dances that we're talking about, like the rest of the world. There I go with my air quotes again. Yeah. So now I'd say in the past 10 years, people are starting to really examine whether the term world dance is the best term for other dances that are community dances that may or may not be on formal stages. Another term that falls into that people use sometimes is ethnic dance, but that has the same issue, right? It's implying that if you're not Western, European American, you're somehow other than our white people tradition. And that is that's the big clue about this first couple weeks readings. So in world dance, we would have dance traditions such as flamenco, which can be improvised or set, Polynesian dances, hula, Tahitian, Filipino, Middle Eastern, both social dances. When I say social dance, I mean a dance that's happening where instead of like the dancer and then your audience is sitting there watching, the audience is also participating. Or like if you go to a dance club or a high school dance, like everybody is dancing those dances together, whether they are fully or not at all choreographed. So if you think about the electric slide or the Cupid shuffle, that's technically choreographed. Everybody's doing the same exact moves in the same exact direction, more or less. Yeah. But it's a social dance because there's not really like an audience watching the dance. The audience is doing the dance. So over here, and there's a lot of overlap here, you see, right? So social dance would be like folk dancing, and you can have waltzes and tangos and swing dances, all these couple dances that people do. All the Latin dances that we were talking about, cumbia, bachata, those are all social dances. They could maybe be considered world dances as well, depending on who's defining it, because of that community nature of the dancing. And you know, we're talking about non-Eurocentric, but also dances from the UK, such as the Morris dance and clogging and Irish, those would also be considered world dances. So how this is the question I want us to consider next, is how does the way that we talk about dance imply how our culture values that dance? So we talked about how ballet and modern, for example, are on a big stage, right? You pay money to go see people do ballet. You don't usually go to a free ballet performance that happens in your friend's backyard, for example. So that suggests a valuation by our culture about both the rareness and the esteem that we put certain kinds of dances in. Does that mean that that dance is not as valued by our culture? No, I don't think it does, but that's the implication. And the other layer of implication is when we put a dancer up on a stage and separate that dancer from ourselves, we are also implying, and maybe it's true or maybe it's not true, that that dancer's skill level and technique is something harder to attain than the common man can do. So like, I can't do point shoes. It's hard. But how does that does that imply what our culture thinks about that particular type of dancing versus, for example, a really incredibly skilled break dancer or hip hop dancer who's doing, you know, point work in their sneakers on the side of the street? Because there's definitely like moments of point work in some turfing styles, plus all this crazy acrobatics. Is that dancer less skilled and less valued in our society than the dancers who's put up on a stage who we pay money to? Like, do you see the question there, right? Paying money to something versus emotionally valuing something, and how each of us individually may have feelings about the value of those two types of dances, notwithstanding, but as time passes by, we're teaching the younger generation that our culture values one over the other by the nature of that presentation, if that makes sense. All right, so I'm going to scooch us through dance history, family tree. We saw that. The hybrid tradition. So hopefully you guys got a chance to scan through this. And I'm going to come back to this idea because remember that one is talking about, oh, I can't skip forward from here. Now that article is talking about the difference between two authentic dance styles and practitioners working together to create a new hybrid style of dance, being different than one person sort of learning or copying another style of dance and then performing it as their own or mixing it with their own technique, being a less authentic or appropriative style of fusion, one might call it, and that there's a difference between the two things. So then this is our week 2 readings. So we talked about how freestyling becomes choreography. Did you guys have any questions about this? Did this make sense to you guys? So we were talking just now about different community dances and how they can be more or less set choreography, meaning that every single step is done in a certain direction and a certain speed and style in a certain order would be super set choreography. And that is on a scale, basically like a gradient scale, to fully improvise. So fully improvise could be like, you're just doing whatever you want right now. There's no rules about what you're doing. There's no plan for what you're doing. You're just doing it. And then there can be places in between. So you can know, for example, that you are going to do a piece that you're going to do it for the length of this one song. And you know that at the climax of the song, you're definitely going to do this one special move that you've planned on doing because it's really impactful at that time. Before that, you're going to keep it small and make it bigger. So that would be a way to sort of do a performance that's in between improvised and freestyle and choreographed. And then there's this idea of movement phrases that we cover in this section. And this is a fairly clear term in the dance world, but it's really important to any of the classes you're going to take with me. And I'm sort of trying to disseminate it amongst the other dance teachers or lecture dance teachers, that we're all using this same term. Because when I ask you guys to write about dance, I'm going to be asking you for phrases of movement. And we were just talking about the way that putting a dance on a concert stage lends it a cultural honor and valuation. This is also true when we write about and discuss dance. And that's why this is such a huge thing for me as a professor emotionally, to get you guys to be able to talk about dance clearly, is because that is part of the way that we add value and give respect to dance, is by being able to analyze and describe it with words beyond just saying it's good, or they were passionate, or I really liked it. So when I ask you for a phrase of movement or a movement phrase, what I'm asking for is approximately 5 moves with a lob-on element, which we'll get to that in a little bit, so don't worry if it doesn't make sense yet. And it's sort of a small progression within a dance. And a move would be an action. So step or sometimes a repeated action. So if I was doing like fist bumps, I could explain a phrase of movement by saying like, she did 5 fierce fist bumps and then shook her head from left to right. And then she rolled her eyes 4 times in a row and did a body roll, jumped forward. And maybe that whole thing, that whole 10 seconds of movement that I just described with 5 distinct actions. And you notice that I put an adjective on them. Laban elements are basically adjectives. And then a little bit of sense of direction. All of that together would be an example of a phrase of movement. And they're usually 10 to 30 seconds, but being able to describe dance and choreography in terms of the actual actions and how they look is what's going to unlock our ability to analyze different dances and compare and contrast them. And that is important because one of the reasons why we think generally as a culture that our culture values white Eurocentric dance such as ballet more than it values hip hop, even though it could be argued that we're spending a lot more money on hip hop dance right now as like the nation. One of the reasons why we have that feeling that one dance is more important or more honored than the other is because we have spent more time describing, studying, and putting down on paper about Western Eurocentric dances because of the Western Eurocentric bias towards academia about Western Eurocentric things. And that I'm pointing to myself as academia before the last 10 years, have not put that time and energy and investment into writing about, talking about, analyzing, and honoring the history and culture of Black dance in America. And that is what this class is really trying to do with your help, is I want you guys to understand how hip hop and jazz dance evolved in America, including the history behind it, because the two things do not happen apart. Yeah. So continuing with our drive-by of week through, we have this quick video which demonstrates some basic dance terms. So if you're describing dance, this is helpful. I try and put some vocabulary into each week. So we were talking about action words: flick, grow, close, etc. Any of these could be action words that you could use when describing a phrase of movement. Here's some more dance vocabulary. I bet it would be helpful if I acted all those out in a video for you guys. What do you think? Yes? No? A lot of those things are in actually the other one. So then we got to the actual dances finally. Hooray! We got to dances. So I'm going to turn this over to you guys quickly, but in this section we talk about traditional African dances, and what I was really hoping this first look, we're going to keep coming back to all of these things. This first look gives you a sense of how obvious it is when we look at the actual moves that most of the dance movements in hip hop and jazz are evolutions of dances that came from Africa via the slave trade and evolved. And so do we have, no, we don't have that here. So I'm going to switch over to a quick video, which is assigned next week. So you will see it again soon. I think it's worth watching over and over again personally. Is that it? Well, that's Duke, Buck, Wing. Let's go to that actual, there we go. So this is a great short video that shows the actual evolution of just 3 major steps. So where's the other screen? So we sort of started this community dance. This down, give you a background visual. We started talking about how these dances come from Africa. So the slave trade brought these dances that were community dances first in Africa. And you can see in the De France video when he's talking about 18th century dances, which is about 100 to 200 years after we brought Black slaves from their homes in Africa and installed them in the Americas. You can see how the buck dance moves that he's talking about with all the downward stamping and percussion is a reflection and evolution of dances such as this Indlamu dance. And there's a few other examples of the original African dances, which are still done today, obviously, because, you know, there was no video 300 years ago, but they're still practiced today in Africa and by African community groups. And yet you can see how they became the buck dances of the 18th century and how those dances evolved into hip hop. And so we have a few examples of that in this semester. What is this here? Oh, because I was looking for step dancing. There is not enough in this class. There are not enough examples yet of great step dance groups. So if you happen to be a step dance fan and you have some videos you would like to recommend to add to this class, I am looking for them. But here you can see, look, there's the downward stamps of the buck dancing. You can see the really isolated, clean lined unison and on staginess, which is going to come from jazz dance through the tradition of, unfortunately, minstrelsy and into Hooray Broadway. And we're going to talk more about that coming up. And I wanted to take a moment to talk about how the Duke University Guide mentioned just for a moment there about how the Black slaves were using dance as an act of rebellion, because that's really important here. I think there is a lie in American culture right now, particularly in parts of our country where people are still in denial about how horrible slavery was. And we're going to talk about how that lie has been manufactured in this country as we read more about both the World's Fairs and minstrelsy itself and the double-edged sword of fame and the need for money, and how that put Black people in a position to reinforce stereotypes, and how, of course, white people were reinforcing stereotypes through minstrelsy and through appropriation of these Black dances in the 17th and 18th and 19th centuries and today. So one thing I wanted to highlight here, we have this history of Congo Square. If you see a video that isn't loading properly on your page, it just has this little doodad, you can usually click through and it'll work. Yay! So don't be shy to click through if there's a video that you're not really seeing show up. So Congo Square was a place in New Orleans where Black slaves who were otherwise banned from doing their native dances would come to go to market. And for some reason in this one little area, they were allowed to dance and play music together. And this square, of course, still exists in New Orleans now and is still a cultural center. In this video, you can see Luther Gray is teaching a drumming class and giving the history of this location. But what's important about the reading that you're going to have about the new Jim Crow is the way that the institutions of law in America used restrictions on dance and music to control slaves. So there was an uprising early on, and because white plantation owners thought that the African slaves were using percussion and drums as a way to communicate to each other in order to have a rebellion, they banned playing drums. And by taking away percussive instruments, the way that these slaves could survive and reinforce their own sense of identity and their own community practices of singing and dancing together is that they started to do percussion on their bodies. And that is where we get the idea of, is it on this page or is it next week? Of pat and juba. It's next week. So good. That's good. I'm leaning you into next week. So patting on your own body as part of what becomes step dancing, as part of what becomes tap dancing, comes directly from this oppression of the slaves. And so that's one of the ways in which, when we just think about hip hop or step dancing as pure entertainment or something that, you know, kids do for fun, and we don't highlight the history, it's one of the ways that we as a culture are accidentally whitewashing the history of our African American community members. And that's what this section is about. We're touching on Congo Square and public dances here. We're going to talk more about acrobatics, vaudeville, things like capoeira in the next section. And now that you've seen some of these movements, how they become a way for oppressed people, just dancing together as an actual political act, because it was more than once in America made illegal for Black people to do dances of their community in public. And the crazy part is how, when you watch the Rise dancing, which is about the evolution of crumping in America, you can really see how dancing for these young people is an act of rebellion against the oppressive situation that they're in. So these dancers in this documentary, for example, join together and have dance battles as a way to keep themselves out of having to participate in gang culture. In the times of Congo Square, coming together at the marketplace and dancing was a way for these people to practice not only their pleasurable cultural dances, but also dances that were a part of their African religions that were made illegal in America as a way to control the population. Because the more that you can deny your slaves being real human beings with family values and religion and cultural practices, the easier it was for the white people to believe that it was okay to keep them as slaves. So that's some of the heavy stuff that's coming up. Whee! and yet all of that rebellion from all those people leads us to some of these amazing cultural treasures that we have. One of the things I'm going to talk about next week and more are the I think I pulled this up already. The Congolese dance are the ways that Western, is it here? No, maybe we can watch it later. I'm just going to point it out. Over here in the Congolese dance especially is this video of young women doing the Mutwashi dance. And these hip movements that happen in this dance, we're going to talk about a lot in the semester, because as a Western Eurocentric dance culture, hip movements are considered to be very sexual. But I love this video because you see all of these really active hip movements that we now associate with dance hall dancing, right? Like twerking, etc., that we as a Western culture often say are sexual. But in this video, you can see that this is like a family dance performance. And this is sort of the end of the segment, and all the young women who've just been performing, now their aunties are coming up and dancing with them and doing these movements, which we usually consider to be very sexualized. But here, they're very much like a work, family, maternal celebration of movement, and they aren't sexualized. And so later in the semester, when we get to the exoticization and eroticization categories of the semester, we're going to talk about how the Western way of looking at dances has changed the way that these dances are valued and interpreted in a way that is inauthentic to what they actually are. Okay, so I've talked and talked and talked and talked. So I would love to have you guys unmute again and sort of share your thoughts about any of the reading, or if you could give an example of anything that we saw or discussed today that you notice personally is a dance that you have interpreted in a certain way that might not be authentic to the way that it was first danced, or if there's something that you learned about a dance that gave it another layer to you. There's no wrong answers here. You could totally be like, no, I knew all of this already, or you could share something that seemed surprising or new to you, or yeah, anything at all. I open the board to you. Welcome, Josh.
Yeah, I have a question actually, because and I don't know if you guys have covered this, and I know it's like a pretty touchy one. Like it's the I feel like I'm gonna butcher like the pronunciation. It's like Mutwashi.
Mutwashi, yeah.
I think that was. I don't. Have you guys covered that? Because I honestly thought that was probably one of the most interesting ones from like 2A.
Yeah.
And I.
Go ahead.
Because no, yeah, no. I mean, because I don't know, because like I was just kind of curious as to like what the context is behind the dance. Like I was trying to like do like research on the side, because like I know like there's like a kind of preface saying that like there's like a lot of like I don't know. I mean, I honestly like that video made me feel really uncomfortable. Like I just felt really bad. Like I don't know if anyone else.
Which one? Because there's a few of them.
It's the one with like the preface saying that like it's
that it looks weird.
it had asked afterwards like about like the power imbalance between like the gender dynamics between like men and women and stuff like that. And
did you Crystal, Hannah, did you guys see the one? Do you know which one he's talking about? Here, I can point to it. It's this one. Oh, I'm going to turn off the sound just so that we can talk over it. But yeah, so we just watched the video clip that I just showed is another form of mutwashi. Is that true? I'm making it terrible. No, the one we just watched was a Congolese dance. But there are other mutwashi shows where you can see these hip movements. So this is like a set choreographed mutwashi dancing group. And in this context, it looks, I think, from my white girl perspective, pretty respectable. Like the dancers are being highlighted and honored on a stage, right? But there's this link that Josh is mentioning down here below, which is a professional dance group from Congo doing a performance at probably a wedding with really talented dancers doing solo and group work, both choreographed and improvised. And then there's this strange number of moments where dudes come up and tip the dancers. And as they're tipping the dancers, I'm trying to see if I can find any of the terrible parts. Not that you all need to be horrified. So I'll just explain. There are times when male audience members come up and tip the female soloist dancers, and one of them steals a kiss. A lot of them like are a bit aggressive with how they give money to the female dancer. And in one of them, you can tell that the female dancer is very uncomfortable about her personal space, etc., being imposed upon by this man who's coming up to tip her in front of this audience. And yet the band leader, who is her boss, is kind of gruff with her about not just accepting his physical advances. And so I think that's what you're talking about, right, Josh?
Yeah, and I think it was kind of interesting, like throughout the video, there's like I think there's at least 2 moments, because like I noticed, I just thought it was kind of interesting that the interactions between like the female performers and like the male audience, I mean, I don't want to sound like, I don't know, ignorant. I mean, it just seemed to me like it just was super uncomfortable. And like, I personally thought like it had to have been like because of like disrespect, because like it was obviously like disrupting like the performance itself. And like, I mean, what I noticed is that every time they like handed over money, they would cover their faces. So like, I don't know. I just felt like if we're doing like, the impression I got was that it was like in a disrespectful way. And I just thought it was kind of interesting that like, I think later on in the video or in between, like there was like, I think it was a male drummer. And then like when he was being tipped by another man, like it wasn't in the same way as women. Like it was like hand to hand kind of thing. And I just thought like there's definitely like kind of like this gender like struggle, gender dynamic kind of going on. I don't know, I just thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah. To add on to your notes about that video, I couldn't help but notice these women's faces, right? And they're like wearing matching outfits, and these are audience members. So I assume this is like the wedding party over here, the family of the wedding party. And I just can't help but notice how this is after one of those uncomfortable tipping scenarios where the guy's like pushing himself on the woman, and the woman has been doing movements which in some contexts, so this is Congolese dance, right? We just looked at that excerpt of the young women doing these Congolese dances with their moms in a non-sexual way, and then we have sort of those similar hip movements happening in this, one would assume, family scenario, but it's being sexualized in a way that it's obviously not cool with these women, and makes some viewers uncomfortable and some not. We're going to go into that question of how hip movements, sexualization of hip movements, and money change the nature and valuation of these dances a lot in the eroticization section, because I think it's a fascinating question. It's sort of where I started when I first started researching for this class, because I think it's a big part of also why that, like, there's two main reasons I think why we don't as a culture have a good track record for honoring hip hop and jazz dances as the huge lineages that they are. And that is, one, we've said that they're about women who are sluts, basically. Now, I do not agree with that. I'm just saying, like, that is the implication that's going on here with these men who think they can take advantage of the women. Or two, that they are from quote unquote uncultured or uncivilized groups and therefore own less value. And that this is somehow a self-fulfilling trueness because these dances are being done, you know, in a square out in public instead of on a stage, even though the whole reason that these dances are done under the sunshine in the fresh air is because the dominant culture has economically oppressed the other culture. Like, maybe they would like to do them in a nice hall, but it was illegal because they were slaves. So those are exactly the sort of questions that I want us to dig into as we watch. I want us to be able to describe movements. Like when we're looking at the mutwashi, do we see how those hip movements relate to current day twerking and current day dance hall moves, so that we can connect the dots between those dances historically? And then do we also consider, as we watch these dances, in what way do I, as a member of 21st century culture, implicitly place cultural value onto dances without even realizing it? And the way that we're going to realize that is by questioning our bias, by questioning how we describe them. Does that make sense? And do we have any questions about it? Oh, there's the Patting Juba video. Excellent. So we're going to get into all of these ways that we have created bias around these dances as we go through the semester. Okay, I'm shutting up again, I promise. Crystal, Hannah, Vincenna, Allison, do you have any comments, or do you want to share any of your surprises this semester? Hello.
I don't have any question.
Okay. Hannah, did you have anything that was shocking or surprising? Or any other questions before we depart? It's time to depart, so we can go on. Looks like Jane is good. Okay. Do we have any questions about next week's week 3? Allison's good. Okay, so next week we're going to start into week 3. We're going to talk more about how these community dances became activists, a little bit about avoiding cliches. So more on the same topic. And this dance elements part is the Laban elements that I mentioned earlier. So that we'll dive into that some more. When we have our conversation next week, I'll pull up a couple of cool videos to watch, and then I'm going to, I think I might post some questions before the discussion so you guys know what I'm going to be asking. Will that be helpful? Yes, yes, no, no. And then I'll see you next week. Cool. I see thumbs up. That's awesome. Yay. Okay, great. Thank you guys for coming and chatting with us. And I will release you. I noticed that I think I screwed up the recording for this Zoom, but I have a backup here on YouTube, so I will post a link to the backup if you're coming looking for this recording again. Okay. Thank you.